Actually, he's blowing up Facebook.
Well, I guess on the surface, it's not strange. Once you start to look underneath the whole. Thanks for making it.
I'm going to the fair after this.
Oh, there's a move. Nice.
Hey, it's good. Well done.
Mhm.
Hopefully everybody handled it pretty well and survived the storm and had power. So moving on, we'll do a call to order. Dave, you're going to take roll.
Sure. Ulster County. If the representative could state their name.
Ed Pine, Ulster County DPW.
Great. City of Kingston,
Greg Crook, Engineering Department.
Town of Saugerties, Town of Ulster,
John Morrow.
New York State DOT,
Amy McKenzie.
New York
Amy.
State Thruway.
Dan Coots, New York State DOT, Region 8 as well.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Town of Hurley, Town of Esopus.
Laura Petit, I'm a proxy for the supervisor.
Thank you. Town of Marlborough, Town of Shawangum,
John Paul.
Village of New Paltz, Town of Warsing, Town of Kingston, Town of Rochester. 8 members present. And then on the line, we have, sorry, Chris Kate, Dan Coots, who already announced. And I think that's it.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Excuse me. Call for citizens' comments. Are there any citizens' comments? Hearing none. Approval of the April 27th, 2021 Policy Committee meeting summary. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes?
So moved. Second.
So Mr. Morrow, second. Ed Pine moved. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carried. Thank you. Communications and announcements, Brian?
Yes, we announced at the last technical committee meeting that the Transportation Alternatives Program grant opportunity had been announced by the New York State DOT. That is still an open program. Anyone who wishes to submit a proposal should have, you have the option to submit a pre-review submittal to get comments and feedback back on your application. That deadline is passed. That was August 17th. And then the final deadline for submissions, I believe, is September 29th. Ulster County Planning Department is putting forth the project.
We submitted for consideration. Thanks, Brian. We submitted for consideration for a, this Transportation Council did a feasibility study for trails from High Mount to Big Indian along the U&D corridor. It's consistent with the legislative policy that this should be a trails only section. The feasibility study was used to essentially complete the TAP grant for a pre-screening. So that's out there right now. The total amount was how much, Brian?
Well, it's a draft amount subject to change. There's a total limit of $5 million per application. This application was coming in somewhere in the vicinity of 4.5. This point, the total project cost.
So we hope to be back to the legislature, perhaps with a late resolution to authorize it's an 80-20% match, so it's a 20% match. So we meet back to the legislature for a late resolution in September, depending on that preliminary, that application for that 20% match. We wanted to make that preliminary deadline, which is why we submitted it.
That's TAP. I do have one announcement regarding the pending infrastructure legislation that is being kicked around like a pinball, it seems, through Congress. I received a briefing from the American Metropolitan Planning Organization Association. that summarizes some of the changes. It's called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And they described its approval by the Senate as relatively unorthodox, is the exact word that they use. Essentially, what this does is reauthorizes the existing Surface Transportation Authorization Act, the FAST Act. So it simply reauthorizes all the existing programs, but then increases the amount of funding for each program. And those increases are significant. It's as much as 40% across the board. In addition, it adds some new grant programs to address issues such as transportation resiliency, carbon reduction, and safety. It also includes appropriations, 184 billion in appropriations to the supplement. So this means over the next 5 years, an additional 274 billion in addition to the baseline that we already have in federal funding will be provided for transportation infrastructure. It's not law yet. See again what comes out of Congress. There is a significant emphasis on bridges as well, from what I hear. So I hope to have enough materials this fall. Oh, the other note is that they expect that whatever iteration to be passed will be passed this September. So when I have more information, I'll do a more comprehensive overview of the new Transportation Authorization Act. But until we have an actual law in hand, it's a little bit of guesswork. Those are the only communications and announcements I have. Oh, no, it's not true. I do have one other. I mentioned at the last meeting that the MPO's triennial review is approaching. Every 3 years, the US DOT reviews an MPO to make sure it's adhering to its planning procedures and policies. This is a very comprehensive review that's conducted by FHWA and FTA staff. They usually come to the MPO for a week, have pretty intensive day-long interviews. They like to do all 3 of the Mid-Hudson Valley MPOs at the same time. That's OCTC, Orange County, and Dutchess County Transportation Councils. So we get reviewed as a TMA and making sure that we are adhering to the procedures of a TMA. And then we get reviewed as an individual MPO. So the dates have been scheduled for the week of Monday, September 27th, where we will be having those interviews conducted. The MPO's interview, this is all going to be done virtually, by the way, I should add. And the MPO UCTC will be reviewed on Wednesday, the 29th. During that time, we've been requested to put together a stakeholder roundtable of our members, that is everyone at this table, plus other non-voting members. We don't have a time set, but it will be at some point on Wednesday. It would be about an hour-long duration. They simply want to ask questions about the planning process taking place. Are you satisfied with the process that's taking place at this table on a monthly basis, bi-monthly? And are you aware of the level of decisions that are taking place and the resources that an MPO should be providing to you? Pretty rote questions, I suspect, but it's an opportunity for our staff at the federal level to get to know this MPO a little better. So we would strongly encourage your support and participation in that meeting if you are able. It will be virtual.
Do the members have a preference for time, morning versus afternoon? Well, that's
This works well for me.
okay.
Yes, it will be virtual.
So it's virtual. So we're somewhat at the mercy of what the federal officials need. But if we can express a preference, we would express that preference to the federal officials. I heard John say morning. Does anybody else want to say anything else? Either one. Okay. All right. So we'll see what the feds want, but we'll John will ask him about in the morning. That's okay.
Thank you.
And don't misunderstand me, I'm flexible, doesn't really make a lot of difference, but this just works well for me.
Okay. No, we understand. No. All right, anything else, Brian?
No, that's all.
Just understand that this is an important milestone for the MPO. It's not something to be looked at lightly. I mean, these are done once every 3 years.
It's been 4 for ours because of the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Because, but I mean, the funding availability and the continuing to meet the federal requirements are serious concerns for the MPO and for the federal officials. So we get write-ups on these are about, a couple hundred pages for the MPO, and we have responded to findings from the past review. We have to respond to them. We're also giving them a lot of information, what they call a desk reference, on all of the demographics of the MPO and what we've done, all of our planning projects, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a serious review, and there are probably in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 federal officials that are involved in this review. Just be aware of that.
10 to 23rd.
27th, we anticipate that ours will be the 29th.
That's
They're going to be down for the 3 MPOs. They'll look at us together, separately, stakeholders and public. So that's kind of the agenda.
That's right. There will be a public meeting as well. We'll put out a notification to our members with all the relative meeting information. But I believe the public meeting is also scheduled for, actually, it looks like it's scheduled for the week prior.
Yeah.
September 22nd. So we'll send a notice out to our members regarding those meeting dates. But the public meeting is important, but we would really like your participation at the MPO meeting on Wednesday, the 29th, if you're available.
Thank you, Brian. Any comments or questions from the council members? Okay. New business, item number 5A, UCTC Resolution 2021-06. It's the allocation of previously unallocated Federal Transit Administration, FDA, Section 5307 formula funds for regional transit projects. I have a motion for discussion purposes.
So moved.
I have Mr. Morrow as the first, Mr. Volk as the second. Is that all right with everyone? I have a motion and second. Brian?
Sure, if I could draw your attention to page 3 of the resolution. Resolution 2021-6 addresses previous unspent TMA unallocated savings. Since federal fiscal year 2015 through federal fiscal year 2020, the TMA has accumulated nearly $16 million in unallocated funds. These are funds that are not allocated to any specific designated recipient. They're there for the TMA to decide how to distribute for various transit needs. We opened up an open solicitation for those funds to all designated recipients within the TMA. And we received 5 applications. 2 applications were rejected as incomplete. Those were for essentially sidewalk improvement proposals in Orange and Dutchess County. And while the merits of the proposals were good, they did not meet all the specifications for these funding, for this funding source. The projects that were recommended by the 3 transportation councils included facility rehabilitation improvements for the Dutchess County Public Transit System at a total of $4.4 million. Signal improvements as requested by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, $4.1 million. That is the total project cost is $180 million. So they have more funding to acquire, but we were able to provide 4.1. And assistance for electric bus purchases, electrification, as well as design of a storage facility for the Ulster County Area Transit System for a total of $4 million. So the 3 project awards that we recommend funding for total $12.6 million. With these allocations, we will have remaining in savings $3.2 million for future distribution. We will also have our 2021 allocation, which is forthcoming. So we should still have a balance probably by the end of this year after we can allocate the 2021 funds of nearly $6 million still in savings going forward by the end of this calendar year. The details of each application are provided in the subsequent pages on the resolution.
Any questions? Comments? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried. Before I go on, I just want to say a little bit about the Ulster County Area Transit Storage Facility. You may recall that the transit, UCTC conducted a feasibility study for the needs for that expansion of that storage facility and a location for that storage facility. And that study is available online. It's also available to council members. But the needs for Ulster County Area Transit right now with respect to that storage facility would be over $15 million. And as the county moves to electric buses, that storage becomes more acute because you can't leave them out. You can't leave them outside. And currently, more than half the fleet for Ulster County Area Transit is stored outside. So we are moving to essentially match our need for that facility with our electrification of the bus fleet. And I'll just leave it at that. But to be honest, we have not found that $15 million for that facility. So we're looking for that $15 million. But it is a need that's out there. Thank you. Resolution B, item B, resolution 2021-07. It's the support for New York State Department of Transportation NISDOT targets for safety performance measures. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes? So moved. Thank you. Do I have? Thank you, Laura. I have a motion and a second. Brian?
Sure. Transportation performance management has been a requirement of NPOs for roughly the past 5 years. First, through the previous Authorization Act and carried through during the FAST Act. There are a variety of different performance measures that NPOs have to maintain and keep check on, as well as New York State DOT, because there's a requirement for the Department of Transportation as well. The various topic areas for performance management include transit safety, and transit rolling stock, infrastructure, including the conditions of roads and bridges, congestion, as well as safety. So the safety performance target is one of the only measures that needs to be updated on an annual basis. So by now, you should be relatively familiar with this target as we've been passing similar resolutions annually. The specific measures are included in attachment 1 for this year's update. Essentially, it's a 5-year rolling average for the 5 focus areas. This is a statewide target. All of our traffic statistics for Ulster County are essentially aggregated among data that is used here. So I want to emphasize this is a statewide target. I should also emphasize that all 14 MPOs throughout New York State are passing this similar resolution, essentially accepting New York State DOT's safety targets. So as in previous years, we drop the oldest year of record out and we add the newest year of record to establish a 5-year baseline, or I'm sorry, 5-year moving average and a trend line. I circulated during the technical committee a very good fact sheet on the target setting methods that FHWA requires NISDOT to follow. I will circulate that again for anyone who is interested, it does show the trend lines associated with the data behind this table. If we follow our 5-year moving average, the percent change that is predicted through that moving average is significant. We're looking at the number of fatalities, a projected decrease by 10%. You'll see in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column over, and so forth. The federal requirements state that you can cap your projected reduction or increase. And so these anticipated projections are capped at 1%. That explains the columns all the way to the right-hand side of the table. So I will circulate the methodology for those who are interested. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. One, David. It was a little more in depth at safety data.
Brian, can you explain the importance of safety data as it relates to adoption of these and what the direction is at the federal level?
The importance of safety data. Well, it's important that we track safety so that we can keep a sense of focusing our federal transportation expenditures on the areas that require them. If there are certain locations where we're experiencing crashes at a rate higher than average or higher than to be expected, then we, in our role as transportation professionals, as members of the Transportation Council, the MPO, and NISDOT, need to be doing our due diligence to make sure that the resources we're allocated at this table are going to where they're needed most, where they will save lives and prevent crashes. That is really the main focus of tracking this data to at least begin to have the discussion. Again, this is a statewide trend line. We don't really get down into the weeds at the county level with this resolution. We've done that through other planning projects. But this is beginning to get the NPOs and the New York State DOT to have the discussion about where our transportation resources are being focused.
Any comments? Questions?
Right. So if you do the 5-year moving average trend line, if you look on step 1, based on what our trends are showing, we have, fortunately right now, declining trends, and the trend line shows a 10% reduction if we follow the trend for number of fatalities, 10.8 for fatality rate, and so forth. The federal requirements state that we have to cap it so we don't have a huge jump or spike in your data. If you have a big jump 1 year, it could affect your trend line. And so because of that, to smooth the data out, they recommend that you cap the trend line at 1%. And so that's the way to smooth out the trend line.
Any other questions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carried. Item number C on the agenda, Resolution 2021-08, it's the amendment to the Ulster County Transportation Council State Fiscal Year SFY 2021-2022 Unified Planning Work Program to add a new project, and that new project is an update to the Transportation Council's website. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Do I have a second? Who was that?
Greg.
Sorry, I didn't hear. I have a motion and second, Brian.
Yes, we decided that it's time for an update to the UCTC website. In the past, we've relied on county support through our Office of Information Services, and we feel that it would be more efficient if the MPO takes it upon ourselves to do the update using consultant assistance. We therefore would like to set aside $30,000 to make available for a consultant, as well as $5,000 for staff support. That would be David's time, Dennis's time, and my time devoted toward this project from our savings for the purposes of updating the UCTC website. We would keep the same URL. It'd still be hosted essentially through the county, but the design would be significantly updated and reorganized. If this is approved, we presently have an FHWA unprogrammed balance of just over $313,000 in federal PL funds. If approved, we would then have a savings of $608,000.
Any questions? Just another comment. Part of this is the fact that we have to not only the best way to describe the current website is it's insider baseball. If you know what you're looking for, you can find it. But if you don't, you're pretty hard pressed. And quite frankly, that's a statement for the rest of the county website as well. But we also have some federal requirements with respect to being seen as a separate and distinct organization from the county. And that's the first piece of this. The second piece of this is that we also have some ADA compliance issues that we have to deal with as well. And the current website will not meet those requirements. So that's another driving factor here. And we do have some quotes with respect to this, so the numbers are not just sort of made up. The numbers are based on conversations we've had with other people that do website updates. Any other questions?
Is this time determined? I mean, we have to do it again in 5 years, or
Well,
is there any anticipation on that?
the short answer would be is that we want to keep the website up to date and current, and we want to make sure that it meets the various trends in technology, whether it be accessible from a mobile phone or et cetera. So I wouldn't say that there's an actual time frame, but the idea would be the other thing that we're currently working on is a resiliency plan that we've signed a contract with. It was in the Unified Planning Work Program. We signed a contract with a company called GZA. And we're moving away from essentially PDF reports and the typical report formats that we've seen in the past. And what we're moving towards is essentially an ArcHub web-based applications for most of our reports. If you want a good example of this, take a look at Moving Forward. It's Dutchess County's new transportation plan. So the short answer is that we would think that this is a step to update the look and feel of the site and the ability to get information out of it. But it's only the first step in terms of trying to make the Transportation Council's reports much more easier to understand and responsive to essentially the interest of the individual that's looking at the website. The example I would give you is that if you're looking at a report, in the idea that you would essentially have to go through the entire table of contents and then flip through it or do word searches on what you're particularly looking for, by essentially moving towards an ArcHub site or moving towards a web-based application, you can provide basically a clickable way to get to where you wanted to go. And then rather than just contain information in the report, you can also supplement that information so that if you're having a discussion about demography, for example, or demographics, you can put a lot of demographics out there that are separate and distinct from the Transportation Council's work, but are also part of the Transportation Council's data needs in terms of make decisions. So if you think of it that way, and if you look at various ArcHub sites, it allows you to peruse documents at a high level and pick your area of interest and then move into that level, satisfy your interest, and if it's even more, you can move through those into a much greater level of detail. So we think that that's the wave of the future, and we think that that's where we're going. That's a long answer to your question. We have to update it every 5 years, but the short answer is we're moving in a direction that effectively takes us away from what we currently have out there, which is here's a copy of the final report PDF, you can download it.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Other old business, Brian?
I mentioned at the technical committee last month that the UCTC annual performance and expenditure report is now available in draft form. I have not posted this online yet. I would like to, as soon as it is approved by, first we send it to New York State DOT, Lisa Cataldo, who's a wonderful resource for NPOs at the Albany Planning Bureau of NISDOT. She needs to review it and approve it, and then we submit it to FHWA and FTA. It is a very detailed accounting of how our time and resources at the Transportation Council are spent, and it follows the format of our DPW. So if you are ever interested, if we've spent time on a certain project or task, that is the report to review. So I'd like to make you aware of that, and we will post it on our website as soon as it's been approved. I already mentioned Transportation Alternatives Program funding.
Can I ask a question? Do you know if anyone else in the council members have applied for TAP funding? I know the city of Kingston applied.
Yeah, have to.
I spoke with Kristen and Greg last week. I know she was under the gun, and there were a couple of projects they were considering, and I think they're on the fence.
Thank you.
Where are those funding announcements? Where are those funding announcements?
The Transportation Council, when we receive them from NISDOT, we do send them out through our mailing list. It's easy to sign up for our mailing list.
You on the
If
mailing
you go
list?
to our MPO, there's a link right at the top.
Okay.
If you're not on it, Laura, and we can get you on, it's very simple process.
We actually also send it to the legislature as well, so there should be some notification through the legislative channels as well.
We get a lot of updates from our federal and state partners. We try to curate what we send out to members because we don't want to send too many notices. But the TAP funding is one we always put forward about.
Google, New York State, DOT, TAP
Yeah,
21,
It comes
or
right up.
22, yeah.
it'll come right up.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Anything else, Brian? Locally sponsored
have
federal aid
under-
projects?
Yeah, locally sponsored federal aid projects. This is going to be a standing item on the agenda for our members to provide any updates on locally sponsored federal aid projects. I don't know if we want to get into this now, Dennis. Do you have any specific questions on projects?
Well, I guess the key is that we know that we've done a substantial amount of administrative amendments to the TIP to push projects back. And Dave, you want to talk about those a little bit? I know you prepared the ballots and I've approved them, so.
We had a number of projects kind of come through with New York State DOT, specifically LPU and staff at Region 8, that kind of we go through and take a look at where projects are and if they're going to meet their obligation dates, and if they're not going to meet it for the fiscal, federal fiscal year, we usually shift them out and adjust the schedules as needed, and that helps with TIP performance to a degree from the reporting standpoint, even though the projects aren't being advanced. So we ask that, if you do have any projects that aren't going to meet your deadlines, that we adjust those schedules and the TIP accurately reflects the current scheduled needs of the project.
Yeah, we moved back a couple of sidewalk projects. I think we moved back Tilson
moved back a
Avenue in the
lot.
town of Lloyd. We moved back the never-ending Tilson Avenue in the town of Lloyd. We moved back. There's we're still looking at the county's Kingston Rail Trail in terms of it being moved back, partly because of the issues with respect to right-of-way. We're still trying to acquire right-of-way through an eminent domain process, and we think we have it. Every time we think we have an agreement principle, the party adds another shoe drops, and they want another concession. So we've been negotiating for about a year now on this right-of-way, and I think hopefully we'll have some agreement by the end of this month, and can have a closing on that right-of-way. I'll just leave that out there. And I think we moved the bridge back in Ellenville, as I recall. So there's a couple of administrative modifications that the council is asked to move by DOT, and under our bylaws for the tip procedures, we can move them back. The administrative committee can move them back. There's just project selection or administrative modifications to the tip as compared to adding new projects or deleting projects. So that's been happening. Any other project updates from any of the members? Ed, you got a bridge, don't you? Well, I know you got one that's federally funded. That's my question. Yeah, we're all set with those? Yeah. Okay. Anything else? I've got one thing I wanted to talk about briefly, and as you're aware, the Transportation Council has been involved. Dave's been leading a safety highway safety study countywide, and that project is coming to conclusion. We're cleaning up the report to be published, but a lot of that data, we picked out the top 10, and correct me here when I'm wrong, David. We picked out the top 10 locations in the county, and we divided them by intersections, 5 intersections and 5 highway segments. And one of the intersections that we picked out as a real problematic intersection because it exceeded the statewide average of accidents substantially was an intersection of Brunswick Turnpike and 4455 in the town of Gardner. That was seen as a highly problematic intersection because of the number of accidents that occurred. And when we looked at the accident data, it's what I would call an equal opportunity intersection where, in spite of the fact when you see it in the field, the examples are that the accidents occur on all 4 legs with almost equal frequency. The county executive acting as a chair of UCTC wrote a letter to the Department of Transportation relative to the need to make changes there, having called this accident out. It was called out by the supervisor of the town of Gardner, who reached out to the Transportation Council and asked us to see if we could do anything. I think within a week after we had wrote that letter, there was fatality at that intersection. And that sort of set off alarm bells everywhere. The department has, we asked the department to have a meeting with the community to discuss it. We were invited to that meeting. The department brought its safety folks to that meeting. And in short answer, the department has decided that the intersection deserves a signal and it will be signalized. They will move as soon as possible to essentially put flashers on the approaches to that intersection. And there was a general sense that this was a really important step from the department to recognize that the intersection deserved a signal. Here's the problem. The next signal contract, according to the department, would not be available until 2024. So the general sense from everyone is that that's just not an acceptable time frame for a response. And so the county executive and the planning department is planning on a response to that, which congratulates the department for recognizing the need, but also essentially indicates that there needs to be a faster way to respond. So what I'm asking is there an opportunity here for the council to essentially weigh in on this as well? Herb?
The department has a where and when contract whereby they make improvements where they're necessary. I won't say on an emergency basis, but close to. Why can't they put the signal in under the where and when contract?
The question was asked but not answered.
I can ask further. See if we get real answer.
When you say signal, are you talking about a traffic light?
Yes, I'm sorry, John. Yes, it is a traffic light. Yes, a traffic signal.
Because you talk about flashers.
Well, the thought being is this is a major state road and the signal would be oddly placed, let's put it that way, on that major state road. So the department has, to their credit, has designed an incremental approach, which effectively starts with flashers on the state legs, right? And then as we move to signalization, the flashers then become a warning for the signalization ahead. So it is a really good design option and a good safety approach.
It'd be similar to what they did in High Falls.
I'm not familiar with that, but
When you approach High Falls right now, they have a flashing sign.
gotcha.
You're doing
Okay.
Lucas and 213?
No, it's just east of the bridge,
Okay.
right where Grady Park is.
Yeah, I know where you're at now. Okay. But yes, the short answer, I mean, I without we going out there and looking at it and seeing what the department's proposing, the short answer is that's the incremental approach.
And the maintenance department put those up, so they were up in a matter of weeks and not months, or they didn't have to wait for a contract.
Do they have an analysis of what the reason for the accidents are there? Is it lack of sight distance, or is it speeding, or people running the stop sign on Brunswick Road?
We had done, as part of it, this was identified as one of the top locations that we looked at. So we go in, we did the crash diagrams and the analysis of the crashes. And it's like nearly all of the crashes are these right angle crashes. And when you look at the site, it seems like you have, sight distance for days, but you have a curve that's very deceptive, and it's difficult to judge the gaps there, even though you have quite the sight distance. Speeds were, it's like 62 is your 85th percentile, which wasn't that excessive for the area. And it really is just, it's one of those instances where the treatments that are available, there are already existing, existing signage there, and it really does get to the level where a signal would be required. One of the difficulty issues, though, when we did a signal warrant analysis, was that the volumes were so low that doesn't necessarily trip the warrants, but from a crash standpoint, it's very excessive and a very clear pattern that you see too. It's not just random crashes. It's really a pattern. Yeah.
So you'd almost liken it to the crossovers on the Taconic Parkway, where people aren't used to stopping at a stop sign. They have traffic at 55 miles an hour going by.
So I raised the question again, is there support from the council to write a letter, to add its weight to that letter? And
To expedite the 2024 date,
yes.
why not?
Tim, did you have something to say?
Yeah, my question about, I'm very familiar with that intersection. I would agree, it feels odd and that the sight lines are probably very good. I just continue not to understand why we can't consider things like a road diet for an intersection like that. I feel like the cars come in really fast, and why not just like tighten it up so like you're not coming in so fast.
I think they were also thinking that Lisa Mandela explained to me, just like David did. My reply was, as a non-traffic engineer, oh, it's not feng shui. So I think she was also talking about they're going to add paint to make it more,
There are
look
things
like
that-
an intersection.
Yeah, I think that the short answer is that there are things that they can do, but it's not changing the geometry of the road. It's more exchanging the warning signs. They've added a second stop sign, is our understanding. But in the end, the thought being is that the accident levels are so high, and there's just when you go out there and you look at the intersection, you're like, what's the problem here? But then the accident data just shows that there is a need for a signal.
And they're very, serious crashes as well. A lot of serious injury, a number of fatalities, and it's a very deceiving intersection. Yeah.
They looked at a speed reduction on 44.
When you start doing, the 85th percentile, where you're out there doing a traffic study and seeing what the speeds are, that's what drivers are naturally doing. You can change the sign, but it's not going to really change driver behavior. And, in fact, might just make people feel that, oh, it's 45 now that I'm going across.
Right, so again, why can't they consider some sort of road diet, narrow the roads entering the intersection so you can barrel through there at 60, 70 miles an hour?
the answer, I would,
I feel like, I'm actually not supportive of the solution here is simply a traffic signal. I think you're probably, maybe gonna help a little bit with a traffic signal, but when we just encourage vehicles to travel at these high speeds on these rural roads where drivers are not anticipating anyone else to be around, this is what you get.
Dennis, we had a couple intersections in our town when we put the signals in, the accident rate just went.
yeah, to drop right down.
So,
Yeah.
but you're looking for this council to take a stand that 3 years is unacceptable. And
That's what I'm hoping for, yes.
Well, I'll make a motion to that effect.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Opposed?
I would think you'd have a similar problem at 44 and Albany Post Road.
So let me address Tim being opposed. Tim, we operate on consensus. If you're opposed, then the council cannot move forward.
I just feel like no one's taking a hard look at lower tech solutions to problems like this. I see it over.
Well, I
and over.
think the safety folks from the city, from
I
DOT
know.
have recommended
I've
it.
met with the safety folks from DOT.
All right.
I will say that during the meeting we had with DOT, they really did take an incremental approach to offer short-term solutions at the location to try to address it, double posting the signage, the flashers that are further out alerting people of the intersection coming ahead, with advisory signage as much as they can. But aside from doing geometry changes, which would, be a bigger project, I think at that point, that's what DOT
Well, the
had in their
85th
wheelhouse.
percentile rule is incredibly
Oh,
problematic.
yeah.
And, I've sat in numerous meetings with various supervisors, and everyone gets incredibly frustrated with that as the response to defending, why no one can do anything. Because we've designed roads for hard to go really
They are
fast.
proposing to do something that has been shown to be a major safety improvement by traffic engineers on a
And I don't
national
think
level.
it's
So,
I don't think it's the fiscally responsible. I don't think it's on traffic lights.
So you remain
all over the
opposed?
road, yes.
thank you.
Could the letter include that recommendation? Seems to me it's, as he says, physically cheaper, but I'm not sure. I don't know the intersection, so I have no idea whether.
I certainly don't want to write a letter that basically discourages the department from installing a signal.
We've got intersections that had blinker lights and that didn't do anything until they put the signal in.
Okay.
Probably not forward.
Any other additional business for the council?
I want to thank everyone for attending today. We weren't sure we were going to be able to pull this meeting off. It's August, after a storm, summertime, and there's other circumstances. So thank you, everyone, for attending. The next meeting is scheduled for September 28th, UCTC Technical Committee.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Be safe, stay healthy.
Oh, and by the way, somebody grab some Danish back there so that I don't take them back to the office.
We would all appreciate it.
Yeah, email.
What is the, any updates on the Port Ewan Kingston Bridge over there on that?
Contract's been let. That's the update. We know that the contract's been let.
Good,
All
okay.
right, so, but I don't know what time frame is on construction, et cetera.
Especially we can't get metal.